Hola, buenas tardes para todos. Les habla Camilo Villamil, gerente de producto de eh, IBM para escala 24/7 en alianza con Connectria. Eh, Les doy muchas gracias por su asistencia a este evento. Es muy importante para nosotros eh, que el mensaje que queremos entregar hoy a través de nuestros asociados de Connectia quede muy claro. Vamos a tener una presentación que va a estar liderada por el equipo de Connectia en inglés y al final vamos a tener un Q&A en el que yo les puedo ayudar entonces a transmitir las preguntas que ustedes tengan. Yo les puedo ayudar entonces con la traducción hacia el equipo de Connectia en caso de que ustedes no puedan hacerlo directamente. En el momento que iniciemos la sección de preguntas y respuestas, establecemos unas reglas bien sencillas para poder sacar el mayor provecho posible de eso. Habiendo dicho esto, le doy paso entonces a Kaylin de Connector para que arranquemos entonces con el contenido. So, Kaylin, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Camilo. Hello, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Kaylin Waltrip, and I'm a marketing manager at Connectria. I will be moderating today's webinar, and we have a lot of great stuff to cover, so let's get started. Before we jump into anything, I would like to introduce our presenters. Troy Mitchell, Vice President of Alliances and Channel, will cover a brief history of Connectria and IBM Power Systems customer challenges. David Wilderman, our Vice President of Solutions Architecture, will provide a technical overview of our recently announced IBM with AWS hybrid architecture. We are also pleased to partner with Escala 24/7 to have our question and answer section moderated also in Spanish for our Spanish-speaking audience. Before I turn it over to Mr. Mitchell and Mr. Wilderman, I want to remind everyone that we're greatly looking forward to that live Q&A at the end of this session. So please feel free to submit any questions using the Q&A section, and we're excited to answer your questions and help you understand more about our solution. Before we get started, I'd like to take a moment to introduce ourselves. Connectria is a global leader in cloud hosting and managed services for IBM, AWS, Azure, and more. We proudly provide award-winning cloud hosting, cloud migration, and cloud managed services for more than 1,000 customers worldwide. We offer expertise across a wide selection of services that include security and compliance, cost and resource optimization, cloud adoption consulting, professional services, and much more. We combine strategy, migration, managed services, and modernization capabilities to deliver end-to-end solutions for complex infrastructure challenges. We help you connect the dots between where you are today and where you want to be by delivering the talent and support you need to maximize your security, compliance, and performance in AWS. We're also proud of our recent achievement in becoming a premier consulting partner in the AWS Partner Network. This places Connectria in a select group of the top 1% of AWS partners globally and further distinguishes us as an AWS partner who consistently demonstrates expertise in understanding customer needs and helping them leverage AWS. We are pleased to be joined on this webinar today with Escala 24/7. They have more than 10 years experience and they are a cloud leader in the LATAM with over 14 offices and coverage throughout Latin America, as well as over 300 of the most innovative companies in Latin America's customers, making them an ideal alliance partner with Connectria to serve IBM clients throughout LATAM. With regional service and cloud operation centers, Escala 24/7 guarantees 24/7 support. They have the largest number of AWS certifications in the market, which serves as testimony and to their commitment and capability in designing, implementing, and managing environments and services on AWS. They also have executed over 700 successful implementations and are the most experienced AWS Premier Partner in the LATAM region. So without any further ado, please take it away, Mr. Mitchell.
Thank you, Kaylin. Hey, thank you very much, everybody, for joining today. I'm very excited to be doing this webinar with Escala and looking at how we together can bring a lot of value to your business. Connectria has been around for over 20 years, and we've made a lot of significant investments over that time, but perhaps none more exciting than what we were going to discuss today. We recently announced with our AWS hybrid offering for IBM Power Systems, and it's really opening the door to the art of what's possible when it comes to the modernization of IBM Power Systems with hyperscale cloud. Before we dive into a lot of great content, though, I think it's important to understand that we've been in this business for a very long time in and around IBM Power Systems and with AWS. Having formed the company in 1996, it took only about 2 years for us to host our first AIX Power System for Deutsche Bank. We quickly realized the need for developing a fully managed hosting practice with support for AS400, AIX, and iSeries. Today, we are North America's largest private hosting provider for IBM Power Systems, with over 1,000 customers in over 30 countries. In 2013, we launched our fully audited MSP practice, and in March of this year, became an AWS premier partner in large part because of our expertise and success with IBM on net with AWS. In 2017, we launched Tria, our cloud management platform, which enables our IBM and AWS customers to now monitor and manage their environments from a single pane of glass, while having an immediate connection to the Connectria support team. In 2019, Connectria acquired WSM International to shore up our professional services team. And finally, just last year, we were awarded the Business Unit Excellence Award at IBM Think. It's an award that recognizes us for driving exceptional client experiences and business growth. It's our commitment to this experience that inspired our investment in a hybrid solution for IBM Power Systems, and that's the topic of today's webinar. Let's discuss some of the challenges customers face with IBM Power Systems. As has been an ongoing trend for the last decade, many companies are getting out of the data center business, and for anyone hosting an IBM Power System in their facility, they've got to figure out what to do with it. Obviously, you're not going to bear the cost of running an entire data center for just the power system workload. So how do I include my power system in a cloud migration plan? And what about support? Managing power systems requires specialized skills, as it's very different than the rest of my data center workloads. How am I going to provide ongoing support for this hardware and software? And finally, while I'd like to extend the capabilities of my power system, the proprietary nature of the hardware and software stack by default limits my ability to adopt open source or third-party applications or party solutions. So why hybrid? There are some common use cases for IBM hybrid architecture with AWS that meet different business and technical requirements. Maybe some of these use cases will resonate with you. One of the most common use cases is that data center exit strategy we talked about. Some organizations have decided that running their own data center just doesn't make sense, as it's not their core business, and they're trying to modernize and move workloads to the cloud. A corporate objective to, quote, go to the cloud or have a cloud-first strategy presents some challenges to IT organizations that operate IBM Power Systems. They may also be running into difficulties finding talent to run the data center, while others are looking to gain new capabilities by leveraging AWS cloud-native services. And lastly, agility is critical, and some companies need the ability to quickly spin up new environments for both AWS and IBM Power Systems. The next use case is where a company might be looking to add or change existing disaster recovery methods. Perhaps they're looking at cost avoidance strategies, using pilot light or slimmed down DR with resources which would allow them to scale quickly. Others already have DR, but perhaps are looking for a better solution than they have today. Still others looking for a turnkey solution where the managed services provider handles all of their DR. In many cases, they may not have the skills or knowledge and are also looking for help with best practices. The third use case is also important, and it's when a customer has decided to get off IBM and wants to re-platform. Where will the environment reside while they are going through this process? Re-platforming is not an overnight affair, in some cases taking years to complete. Having Connectria as a partner with Scala can get you access to technologies like the IBM Flash Copy Toolkit, which can allow you to create duplicate copies of your production IBM i systems, which can aid in testing and development. Having IBM I and AIX systems next to AWS means that the data can be readily accessible. This might mean you can keep your investment in IBM and leverage new capabilities in the cloud or not, but it gives you the flexibility to decide and do it at your pace. And finally, an emerging use case made possible by this hybrid architecture is to leverage your IBM investment by embracing an augmentation strategy with AWS. This will again let you maintain your IBM Power System so you retain your investment, but open the door to modernizing the platform as you leverage AWS services to introduce new features and capabilities. This could be as simple as adding S3 storage or as complex as adding invoice capabilities or dashboards, while leveraging the back-end databases on the IBM I or AIX Power System. I mentioned TRIA in the earlier timeline slide, but it's really important as Connectry has made a significant investment in this cloud management platform. This platform, basically made accessible to all customers, enables them to both view their AWS and IBM workloads through a single pane of glass. They can access that through their desktop or even through their mobile phone. So monitoring of that IBM environment and being able to go in and understand utilization of CPU and storage and memory is now accessible and easy to basically view, while you're also able to log in and view your AWS environment. So things like managing security and compliance to different industry standards is accessible. Looking at your cost structure and being able to provide cost optimization insights, and even looking at performance or performance degradation and being able to take action with your partner to resolve those issues and or improve the end user experience.
Thank you so much, Troy. Next, we will head into a brief overview of our IBM I on net with AWS hybrid architecture. Dave, would you like to take it away?
Sure. Thanks, Kaylin, for that introduction. And thank you everyone for joining us today, and the Escala folks for hosting us as well for this webinar. Go ahead and move on to the next slide, Kaylin, so we can start talking about the solution. So in terms of what Connectry is providing, we'd like to go over a little bit of the hybrid architecture that we've built out in the US East and US West environments. So right next to AWS's US East 1 location, we've gone ahead and positioned a data center where we can go ahead and host the Power Systems component, so that we can go ahead and provide either IBM I, AIX, or what commonly known as AS400 for a lot of the folks out there who have been on the platform for quite some time. Between those data centers and the AWS locations, we have determined that we have a less than 2 millisecond latency between all of the availability zones between all of those locations. So, basically you can go ahead and treat those environments as if they were just another availability zone from AWS going into your AWS environment. So you can go ahead and have those power systems right beside those AWS environments in the x86 component. Go ahead and move to the next slide, Kaylin. So we have this is a very high level overview of the architecture. And what it's kind of showing right here is the AWS component showing that low latency connection, as well as the US East and the US West data centers. The US West data center is a mirror copy of the US East data center and has all of the same capabilities and components in it. Within the US East data center, we can present IBM workloads in a number of different ways. We can do them as a dedicated environment. We can do them as a shared environment where it's more cloud-like, or we can do them as kind of a colo environment where there's a specific use case where you have a specific component that needs to be put in place. Within those environments, we also provide all of the shared networking, the shared fiber channel, and to include the shared disk component, or we can provide dedicated disk if that is a requirement as well. We also have shared VTL that can be then replicated from the production facility over to the disaster recovery facility. We have a multipath turnkey MPLS solution, which allows us to go ahead and provide connectivity between the two different data centers. And then we can support either a SAN-to-SAN replication or a logical replication using tools like Mimics to go ahead and perform that activity. Next slide, Kaylin, so we can zoom in a little bit closer on this environment. Within the US East and the US West facilities, we can utilize tools for replicating that data, like I mentioned before, the Mimics tools. There are other tools that are available if that becomes a challenge where you need a specific tool that you already have in place, say for instance, either MaxAva or iTerra. We just need to go ahead and work with you to determine the way that we'd like to move forward with that. Let's go ahead and move on to the next slide, Kaylin. Let's go ahead and kind of talk about disaster recovery, because this is oftentimes probably the lowest and easiest method for most folks to go ahead and move into our AWS hybrid cloud environment. So looking at the diagram in front of us, we have the on-premise environment, so an existing customer environment today, and we could go ahead and they would have likely a Cloud Endure or AWS, as I believe they're calling it, their Elastic Disaster Recovery Service, where they can go ahead and provide those agents that would then replicate into the AWS environment. And that would be something that Scala would be able to help you with. And then on the IBM I component side of it, we have the customer's power systems that would be running in their location, and we're showing them logical replication utilizing Mimics over a site-to-site VPN tunnel. We can support either a site-to-site VPN tunnel. We can support other mechanisms in terms of communications to include MPLS, SD-WAN, and a lot of other different communications methods, depending upon what your needs are. We also support from our data center and your data center. If you have an existing data domain or cybernetics device, we can support virtual tape replication between those two sites as well. We utilize, on our side, we are utilizing encrypted storage. Typically our storage is flash storage, so we're utilizing encrypted flash storage at all of our data centers. And our data centers all have Power Systems hosts in them. Typically we're using the 922s and the 914s as our primary physical platforms that we're deploying these IBM LPARs on. We can support other platforms as well. We also have 924s out there, and we can go ahead and host the larger systems. If you're looking at like the 1080s, those are also an option for us as well. One of the things I'll point out is within a customer's environment, we have something called Edge Connect, and I'll go over that a little bit further down in the discussion in the webinar today. We can provide virtual and physical firewalls in the environment as well to support those site-to-site VPN tunnels. So we can provide either a virtual Palo Alto or a physical Palo Alto. That's our de facto standard that we use within our data centers today. And we can size those appropriately to whatever the environment needs. Kaylin, if you could go ahead and flip to the next slide. AIX is very, very similar to the IBM I in terms of what our hybrid layout looks like. We go ahead and we utilize a lot of the same components that you see from the IBM I AWS hybrid architecture that we showed previously. There's some few minor differences that I'll go ahead and point out. One of the things that we can support is we can support going ahead and doing enterprise backups locally at the customer environment. So if we needed to go ahead and perform backups utilizing Commvault Media Agent within the environment, that is something that we could do, and then we can replicate that up to our multi-cloud backup, and then your backups would be available in the DR location in the event that that was ever necessary. Typically, we're wanting folks to have at least IBM 6.1 or higher. 7X is obviously preferred. It's the latest and greatest. There is some other flexible options in terms of, if the customer already has a SAN today, an IBM SAN today, and they were looking to go ahead and do SAN to SAN replication, there is the option for going ahead and performing SAN to SAN replication between the two sites as well. So that would be another option that we could consider when a customer is looking at doing DRAS with IBM AIX as well as IBM I, to be quite honest. Next slide, Kaylin. This environment is showing basically a production and disaster recovery environment for the IBM I. So in other words, this would be entirely hosted in the US East, in the US West data center facilities that we were mentioning earlier. We can go ahead and provide those same Power Systems hosts in both the East and the West. And typically what we'll utilize is SAN to SAN replication via IBM Global Mirror between the two sites, so that we can go ahead and have a block for block copy of the production environment in the disaster recovery environment. Oftentimes this is a lot better for our customers. They don't have to worry about mimics or ITERA or any of those things, and forgetting that a library wasn't included or wasn't set up within the replication tool. So it makes it a much safer mechanism in terms of replication. Oftentimes it's also a cost savings opportunity for a lot of folks, because then they don't have to purchase that software. They don't have to purchase that license for mimics or ITERA or MaxAve or whatever replication tool that they're utilizing today, because the SAN to SAN will take care of that. And the IBM I partition in this particular case would be offline, so there wouldn't need to be an entitlement associated to that IBM I partition as well, and that would be another opportunity for cost savings for customers. In terms of AIX, similar model that we described before. We have as I mentioned before, we have Commvault's enterprise backup in all of our data center locations. They're going ahead and doing a disk-to-disk backup from the LPAR, and then we go ahead and we take that disk-to-disk backup and we migrate it up to what we call our multi-cloud backup, which is an amalgamation of several different cloud providers that can utilize S3 compatible type storage. And we go ahead and we can present that storage or those backups out of any of our data centers that we have today. As I mentioned earlier, there's a lot of different flexible connectivity options that we probably need to go over in terms of what the customer, what you could bring to our environment today. One of the things I'll point out that's a nice feature for a lot of folks is our Edge Connect. Our Edge Connect is basically a feature where we can go ahead and provide a port connectivity for a device that the customer would need to co-locate within our environment. That could be an SD-WAN device. That could be another physical appliance that couldn't be converted from physical into virtual. It can be a router, it can be a firewall, it could be any number of components that would be dropped off into our data center. And then we can provide both the port as well as the co-location space for that device. So it wouldn't be a case of it, if there's any kind of last mile things to get out of your data center, or an item that needed to be available in the disaster recovery location, we could place that device within the environment and be assured that that would be able to participate within the Connectria hybrid environment. As you can see in this diagram, where there's a number of different ways to connect to us, we have internet that we're providing to customers out of our data centers today, and this can be used in order to go ahead and support disaster recovery, where we're doing those replications from the customer site over to our environment, as well as utilized for customer access from multiple sites to if they needed directly access either the IBM I or the AIX environments as well. We can provide MPLS, or we can utilize a number of network as a service providers out there. One of our preferred providers out there that we utilize today for a lot of folks is Megaport, and that's an option that we can provide to customers. because we're also located in Equinix data center facilities, one of the nice things that we can do for folks is they are in an Equinix facility today, they can leverage Equinix's fabric in order to cross-connect within our environment and provide those network points of access into the Connectria AWS hybrid environment. Next slide. So in terms of what we can do and what a customer could do in terms of the responsibilities, this diagram here is kind of showing all of the components as if you went ahead and managed the entire stack yourself. So today, you know, you have the Amazon Web Services component and all of those pieces of the puzzle. And obviously, Amazon is providing all of the compute, the storage, the database, and the networking, but there's a lot of other components in an environment that are required in order to have an overall AWS environment. And then looking at it from the IBM perspective, you have all of your existing components that you have to manage today, but then you would also have this high latency connection between your environment as it stands today and the AWS environment, which may or may not have an impact on your applications and your usability of those applications within the environment. Next slide. So this would be what the responsibilities model would look like if Connectria and Escala was providing you the level of service that you were needing within the AWS hybrid environment. So Connectria would be able to provide you all of that IBM I with a low latency connection to the IBM I components or the IBM AIX components, as well as providing all of that operating system management, the infrastructure, any of the data center services, and then security and compliance for all of those components as well. And then Escala would be able to provide all of the AWS side components to include, you know, the migration, the architecture on top of those AWS regions. Our security services include a number of different compliance standards that we adhere to. These are backed up by our 24/7 NOC, SOC that we have within the Connectria environment that we can go ahead and provide, you know, all of the monitoring and escalation and incidents response that is necessary for a compliance environment. Galen, if you wanted to go ahead and wrap up, and we can go ahead and have some questions.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much, David, and for you, Troy. And folks, I know we covered a lot of details today. So now if you have any questions, we would be happy to answer them live for you. You're more than welcome to submit any through the Q&A section, even if they are in Spanish. We have translators available to us. Troy, Dave, is there any common questions that we get that we'd like to start off with while folks are submitting their questions?
Hola, bueno, entonces de acuerdo a lo que estaba diciendo Kylie, por favor envíen sus preguntas en este momento. Igual el equipo de Connectria está, en este momento tiene una lista de preguntas comunes que vamos a presentar una vez se resuelvan las de ustedes, las que ustedes amablemente nos envíen por el chat. Entonces, bueno, damos unos minutitos para que ustedes envíen sus preguntas y continuamos. Okay, bien. Kylie, so no questions so far, so we could probably move on to, you know, frequently asked questions, so that way we can, I'm pretty sure that we're going to cover the most common ones that the clients may send.
Okay, we will take a look and see some of our frequently asked questions, at least to give some insights and support. I know some of our most common questions are around the realm of how somebody would get started, say, with disaster recovery using Connectria's Power Systems, or just how we handle IBM I licensing. Either of those do you think would be most relevant, Dave or Troy? And if you wanted to answer either.
Sure, I can go ahead and take those. Yeah, not a problem, Troy. So In terms of how they would get started with us in terms of disaster recovery, probably the easiest route is to go ahead and first engage the Connectria sales team in order to go ahead and start that process of determining what is the needed requirements within the environment. Oftentimes what we're going to have to do is we're going to have to size the environment based upon the number of cores that are in the environment, the amount of memory that's in the environment, the amount of disk that's in the environment, and make sure that we have those resources reserved for the disaster recovery environment once we've kind of gone through that sales process. Then it's a case of going through that onboarding process where we go through and do introductions of the engineering teams between your staff and our staff. And then it's also going ahead and getting hooked into the TRIA platform that Troy pointed out earlier before, as well as getting those resources stood up and running and available for the customer use in terms of moving to a disaster recovery. A lot of the other parts of disaster recovery are building out that run book and that disaster recovery plan, and those things are going to be, or kind of a conversation between the Connectria team as well as the customer side to make sure that we're adhering to everything that would be necessary to provide those disaster recovery services. In terms of the IBM I licensing, there's a couple different ways that we can handle this. If the customer was, say, for instance, positioning gear in our data center and it was more of a co-location scenario, then their licensing would pass along. If they were looking to go ahead and just have that licensing available, we have the licensing available for the IBM I and the AIX platform in kind of a SPLA type or a service provider model agreement with IBM, where we can go ahead and spin up licenses as necessary for the environment in terms of as little as a month to as long as what is necessary. And then it would just be those license charges that would be incurred during the time when those IBM I LPARs were stood up, or those IBM AIX LPARs are stood up and running. Does that make sense?
Hey, Dave. Yeah, Dave,
Yes.
to add a question for folks that are looking at moving to cloud, can you touch on our ability to provision portions of a core and the impact that has on entitlements or licensing?
Sure. So Connectria can provision as little as 1/10 of a core increments for customers' environment. So you can get as small as 1/10 of a core, and 2 GB of memory is the smallest partition that we can go down to. And that pretty much is, that's a very, very, very small environment. Oftentimes we only see that really in development type environments, but we can be sized as small as that. And that actually has a very direct impact, especially in the case of IBM I, considering what the licensing costs are there in terms of what monthly costs would be associated.
Yeah, so this is a really good cost optimization type of exercise too, for certainly dev, test, QA types of workloads, isn't it?
Correct.
Kaylin?
I was going to chime in too with a little additional context on Connectria. We work predominantly with several healthcare organizations throughout the United States, as well as financial services, manufacturers, and logistics. And so, Troy or Dave, can you offer maybe a little bit more information in terms of how important security and compliance is? I know that is one of our customer primary concerns that we're able to address.
Troy, I'll go ahead and let you start, and then I can go ahead and pick up.
Love that. Thank you. So yeah, financial services, obviously, in the timeline slide in the beginning of our presentation, we referenced Deutsche Bank. And so, we've been owning and operating our own data centers for the last 20 plus years. And in doing so, have passed and annually pass 13 different audits related to different compliance standards. We've parlayed that into our business with AWS as well in terms of those environments and making sure that if a customer is coming to us and needs to maintain, for example, PCI, SOC 1, SOC 2 compliance, GDPR requirements related to their FinServ business, or possibly HIPAA high trust in association with their healthcare business. Those are standards that we can apply to their environments and maintain as it relates to the infrastructure and the data center services that we are providing. We do not get into the application layer and the management of the application and some of those data handling practices that the customer still owns, but we will, from an infrastructure layer, provide support in terms of their audits and things like that, so that we can provide the information necessary for them to maintain that level of compliance. Over to you, Dave.
Yeah, I think you did an excellent job there, Troy, of covering all of the compliance standards and what we do for our environments and for our customers.
Good.
Well, I know we covered a lot today, so you can always refer back to this webinar. And if you have any additional questions after today's program, you're welcome to visit connectory.com. We have a landing page that explains everything about our IBM OnNet with AWS solution. And you can contact Escala today at info@escala24x7.com to get started. Thank you both again, Dave and Troy, for presenting, and thank you very much to Camilo for assisting us in Spanish.
Thank you, Kylie. Muchas gracias a todos los asistentes. Entonces, como dice Kylie, están los correos disponibles que ella mencionó para cualquier pregunta de seguimiento. Vamos a buscar entonces que el seguimiento a otras preguntas que ustedes puedan tener o interés posible en profundizar sobre lo discutido hoy se haga en cada país con las personas encargadas del lado de escala en cada uno de los países o las regiones. Y bueno, esperamos estar en contacto con ustedes en los siguientes días con ese propósito. Muchísimas gracias a todos por su asistencia y que tengan un muy buen día.